Welcome back to Velshi and Rule. Over the weekend, the community of Santa Clarita, California, mourned the loss of a 15-year-old girl and 14-year-old boy who were shot and killed at Saugus High School. It has now been just 12 days since that latest school shooting, and classes will resume on Monday. And it has been almost 2 years since a former student opened fire at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history, where 17 people were killed and 17 others injured. Now, the father of one of those victims is speaking out in a scathing new op-ed directed at President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Fred Guttenberg writes in this new op-ed, quote, "There is more to be done, but let's begin here. Until this White House and Majority Leader McConnell are ready to stop politicizing gun violence and to complete the work sent to them by the House of Representatives, more Americans will die." We're going to hear directly from Fred Guttenberg in just a moment. But I want to share this. Since the Parkland shooting and many others, there has been a loud chorus for change, but not much has actually happened, at least on the federal level. We are still waiting for the Senate to take up two bills the House passed back in February. H.R. 8, known as the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. It requires background checks at gun shows, over the internet, or with private dealers. Right now, there is no check required for sales at shows between individuals. H.R. 1112, the Enhanced Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019, would require dealers to wait at least 10 days for a response from the background check system before the sale can actually go forward. Right now, a sale can go through after just 3 days if there's no response. There have been some incremental changes elsewhere. Dick's Sporting Goods raised the gun sale age to 21 and took semi-automatic rifles off the shelves. It is also reviewing whether it will continue to sell guns altogether. Walmart raised the age to buy a firearm and ammunition from 18 to 21. 3 states have raised the age to buy long guns to 21, California, Florida, and Washington. And there has been a new focus on red flag laws designed to take guns from people who might be considered dangerous. 17 states and the District of Columbia now have those red flag laws. Before Parkland, only 5 states had them. Joining me now, the author of that op-ed, Fred Guttenberg, and Deputy Director of the Center for Gun Policy and Research at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Cassandra Crafacey. Fred, your daughter, Jamie,
Stephanie,
was just 14 years old, a dancer, a student when she was killed. What do you make of the changes in gun legislation in the last 2 years?
You know, I'm glad you distinguish between what's happening nationally and locally, because you have mayors, governors, and state attorney generals across this country who are doing amazing, heroic things. You have businesses who are doing amazing, heroic things. Ed Stack of Dick's Sporting Goods is my hero. However, you also have Washington, D.C. And what's happening in Washington is the House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi and some really heroic people in the House, have gone ahead and passed legislation that, if enacted into law, will start saving lives immediately. And sadly, Mitch McConnell and the current occupant of the White House are standing on it. They will not allow anything to go forward. And so it puts everything at a standstill. And what they do is it's worse than doing nothing, because then they take that and they act as if they're doing something and the House of Representatives isn't, and that's the ultimate lie. And I will tell you, this next election can't come soon enough.
Fred, it was a specific tweet by the president that set off your response to both him and Mitch McConnell, where he wrote this: Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, AOC, and the rest of the Democrats are not getting important legislation done. Hence the do nothing Democrats. USMCA, National Defense Authorization Act, gun safety, prescription drug prices, and infrastructure are dead in the water because of the Dems. That was the tweet. What was your immediate reaction?
I called him a liar. And because he uses his Twitter platform to redirect and to protect himself. That's what Twitter is to him. It's a platform for him to use self-protection. However, he should be fighting to protect the safety and citizens of this country from gun violence and other potential risks. And he's not, and it's dishonest. He lied. They're not doing anything. There was a period of time where they were working with certain senators, like Senator Chris Murphy, on trying to come up with something after the Dayton shooting and the Texas shooting. But then he walked away from the process. He got frustrated, and now he's going to lie about it. The reality is this: the House of Representatives has sent legislation that could be, that hearings could be held on right now in the Senate, and that votes could be taken on right now in the Senate. That's the way democracy works, and they're not doing it.
Cassandra, less than 1 month after the Parkland shooting, Florida passed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. That banned bump stocks, permitted teachers that were trained to be armed, and it raised the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21. The NRA filed a lawsuit against the state challenging that age restriction. What do you think is the solution?
I think gun violence is a problem that doesn't have one policy solution. It's going to take a suite of policies that are focused on a range of issues that contribute to gun violence. But it's also not just going to be policy. We need to support community-based violence prevention programs, and we need meaningful investment in the communities themselves so that we can begin to reduce gun violence.
Cassandra, Attorney General Bill Barr recently announced the launch of what's known as Project Guardian. It is a nationwide strategic plan to reduce gun violence, in part through improved background check enforcement. What's your thought on it?
It's certainly a step in the right direction, but it should not be seen as the end of the path. Any conversation that we have related to reducing gun violence needs to be focused on risk and accountability. We need to focus on who's at greatest risk of causing harm with a firearm, and we need to create a system that increases accountability to make sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't get them. Research shows that requiring purchasers to get a license, strong laws that dispossess domestic abusers, and extreme risk protection orders that temporarily remove someone's firearms are all evidence-based policies focused on risk and accountability.
Fred, you said the president was a liar after he sent that tweet, but you didn't mention him by name in your op-ed. Why?
I actually have gone away from mentioning him by name.
Why?
Well, number one, the man loves to hear his name. It's his brand, but he hasn't earned the right for that positive accolade. And
I don't think you were going to be using his name positively in an op-ed.
Well, I've spent 2 years waiting for him to actually do the right thing on this issue. And every time he has the chance to do the right thing, he goes ahead and he behaves in a way that is infuriating. And I just, to me, that title, yes, I understand he resides in the White House, but he doesn't behave in the way that I'm used to my presidents behaving. And I hope he changes my mind. Listen, Stephan, you've heard me say from day one, anybody who wants to do the right thing on this issue, as soon as they decide to do the right thing on this issue, I will embrace them. But until you decide to do the right thing on this issue, and when you are purposefully doing the wrong thing and hurting people because of this issue, I can't be supportive of that. I hope he changes his mind. I'm sorry, this is falling out. I hope he decides to turn around and do the right thing on this issue, but he hasn't yet.
All right. Fred Guttenberg, Cassandra, Chris Fahy, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.